Today, we are talking with Anupam Shobhakar about the fretless guitar and how he uses it for Indian classical music and fusion prog rock. My name is Jeff Starr, and this is my channel, Not Bad Films. Anupam, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Jeff, thank you for having me, man. My pleasure.
This is going to be cool because, I wanted to have you as a guest because I'm really fascinated by how you're taking this, or creating this fusion of Indian classical music and sort of this modern rock approach. So you start with guitar, and then you explored Sarod, and you've studied that quite intently for a really long time. But now you've made this decision to sort of to fuse these two together, and obviously fretless guitar is now like sort of the, I'm going to say your main instrument. But for viewers who don't know what a Sarod is, what is that?
Let me show it to you real quick.
Perfect.
It's a 25-string fretless instrument from North India. This is a Sarod. This baby here. Yeah, so it's a 25-string instrument. North India, it's fretless as well. And the name Sarod basically is Persian for good sound or music, pleasant sound, I believe. Yeah. Sarod. I mean, back then in India, even the sitar, for that matter, is a Persian name. So, I mean, these cultures were pretty amalgamated and transient back then, and they shared a lot of information, not just in music, but in literature and all kinds of things. So that's the etymology of the name. And this modern Sarod, 25 strings, fretless. It's got a, you can see, the belly has a goat skin on it, and that helps project the sound. I think of the Sarod as a voice and a drum.
Okay, interesting.
I'm left-handed, but conventionally, if you're right-handed, imagine trying to find a left-handed Sarod.
We're gonna get to this in a bit. I think, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it's played like the lute family of instruments with a plectrum. This is played with a coconut shell plectrum known as a java. So it has a lot of that sort of percussive identity. It's a close cousin, debatably, to the Afghan rabab.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so you can see even shape-wise, it has similarities.
Yeah, a lot of similarities shape-wise, except rabab would be fretted. There's like a string fret, sort of.
Yeah, there's string frets, and it's a wooden fingerboard.
Correct.
As opposed to a steel fingerboard.
And you play the Sarod with your fingernail as opposed to the flesh of your fingertip, correct?
You play the Sarod with your fingernails as opposed to that itself is also a little bit of as everything in Indian classical music. Sorry, I just had to get out of frame for a second. I was grabbing the plectrum.
All good.
This is, see if that's visible, is a Sarod plectrum. It's a coconut shell, and it sort of has this warm, very sort of mid-rangey sound. I mean, I'll send you clips as we were talking. Yes, you do play with your fingernails. In my case now, they're really short because of all my guitar shenanigans.
Yeah.
My fingernails are very short, but then you have to kind of take care of them, like almost like a flamenco guitar player.
Yeah.
Like you have to have the filing tools, and it has to be the right height, the right length. You got to constantly make sure that the grooves of your nails are consistent. Otherwise, the grooves will get stuck in the strings, or it'll mess up the sound. But as far as even like the fingernail technique goes, so Indian music is complex in a way that there are a lot of families known as gharanas. Gharana basically means a home or home-like. So you would have an artist that sort of developed a style individually, somebody who was some type of visionary, somebody who was a composer that took a particular niche and an idiom and took it forward. and then they would add their own personal preferences into the music or what they liked. So even with like Sarod Gharanas, you have some artists that prefer playing with their calluses as opposed to their nails, because sometimes nails can be overly metallic sound output, where with the calluses you get more of like that skin, a warmer, more,
Sure.
organic type of sound. And some artists like Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, the great Sarod player, he would sort of have a combination of both.
Hmm.
And you sort of have to, even like in a real world hack, you have to sort of develop a little bit of your callus technique as well, because your nails are gonna, playing Sarod all the time, your nails are gonna get worn out. So if you have that sort of callus technique, it helps. Like, if you're in a concert situation and your nails are just gone, you can sort of rely on that
Yeah.
a little bit. So it's a little bit of a combination. With the nails, you get more of a top end in the sound, or more metallic. With the calluses, you get more of that mid-range type of thing, and that combination makes the
Yeah.
sound.
And now a lot of fretless instruments that, let's say, would be plucked, sustain is one of the big things that you're sort of always trying to maintain, right? Sustain wants to die off if you. So does using the nail, I would assume, against the metal fretboard helps to create a longer sustain to the note versus using the fleshy part of the finger?
Absolutely, that's actually right. That's correct. If you look at Indian music as a style or Indian music as a culture, what supersedes any instrument in Indian music, whether melody or percussion, because it is a melodic and a rhythmic system, it's not a harmonic system,
Mhm.
for most intents and purposes, as we understand in a Western sense. Uh, so what's sort of central to Indian music is the human voice,
Yeah.
is the Gayaki as it's known. The Gayaki, Gayak is a singer, so Gayaki is a style that's coming out of singing. So the voice has a lot of sustain. So the sustain becomes important in that.
Mhm.
Everything is functional in that sense. How close is what you're playing getting to the human voice?
Yeah.
So if you need the sustain, then the sitar, and that's why the sympathetic strings also play a big part.
In moving from Sarod to fretless guitar, were you finding that the Sarod, you had ideas you could only go so far, or were you just a guitar player at heart and you wanted to bring that over? Like, why after spending so much time on Indian classical music with the Sarod, why sort of set it aside and go on this other path now?
Well, actually, my story is a little more convoluted. So it starts with the guitar, and I'm always been a guitar.
Yeah.
It was the Sarod that was like for a while the imposter in my life.
Okay.
I started Sarod, which is like, when I tell that to people that kind of don't know my background, they're always like, "But then, most of the world knows you as a Sarod player,"
Yeah.
which was also a part of necessity. So I grew up, come from a family of musicians, and it's a long line of musicians, and music was pretty serious business in our family. I got on the guitar really early. I started playing when I was 6 or 7. I think around 6, and I was already performing by the time I was 9 on the guitar. My grandfather was my first teacher, and I grew up in late 90s Bombay, where it was Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax, and Dream Theater, and I'm a metalhead. I sort of grew up with that culture. It was a intensely guitar-centric culture in my city, where I grew up.
Sure.
And I was already starting to get a little disillusioned by just playing metal, and I was sort of getting into jazz. This is like when I was 15 or 16. Man, at that point, a friend of mine gave me a Shakti record. I heard like John McLaughlin, do
Sure.
that stuff, do the first Shakti thing, but it just blew my mind. It was funny because I grew up with Indian music at home, not in my bedroom when I was playing Dream Theater licks, but my mom was singing outside. She was singing Rag Bhairav in the morning, Rag Yaman in the evening. It was constant music. My grandfather was a sitar player. Constant music. Indian classical music was always on. My dad used to have his morning coffee with listening to Bhimsen Joshi sing. So it was, but then the moment my brother and I woke up, it was like Ride the Lightning. you know, this is the music of my food, of my of my land, of my family. And this is so cool that somebody's doing this on the guitar. And it was really hard for me to find a teacher that would readily open up the world of Indian music on the guitar. Now it's a lot easier. Even I teach, and it's a different world.
Yeah.
It was like, oh no, that's a Western instrument. You gotta learn Indian music on an Indian instrument.
Hmm.
So that's why I say it was out of necessity. It wasn't my first choice, and I didn't want to gravitate towards sitar because it was like you had to pull and bend the strings differently, and you had to wear this mizrab on your finger. Guitar,
Yeah.
the sarod just felt
Yeah. As a guitar player
older.
who, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, as a guitar player that studied sitar and,
there
and
you go.
still tries to, it's like, oh, this is so similar, but it's so not.
It's so not.
And there's
It's
some
amazing.
really major hurdles. Yeah. Yeah.
Just the muscle memory and the brain muscle and the physical muscles required for
Yeah.
sitar. It's just I don't have them.
Yes.
I
Physical muscles is definitely the
it's the thing.
right phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into Sarod when I was like 16 or 17, really.
Hmm.
Pretty late.
Yep.
Usually in Indian music, you get into this stuff when you're like 5 years old or whatever. But I had the music again, like vicariously, and my mother used to teach me singing.
Hmm.
So the music was there. And again, it was a hurdle, man, because my first teacher was so strict. His name was Suresh Vyas. He studied with the great Annapurna Devi, Sur Bahar player,
Mm.
and was also like a mentor, a little bit of a mentor to me because she helped me out. I spent a little bit of time with her towards the end of her life, and she was just mind blowing, like the type of advice, and she helped me out, in more ways than one. Great musician. So one of her senior students was my main Sarod teacher. His name is Suresh Vyas. He's from Bombay. And again, coming from guitar, it was not just the physicality, it was also like the ear training was
Sure.
so hard because just intonation and equal temperament, you know,
Yeah.
right? Tune, because the way I was playing guitar on fretted guitar, playing Western, rock and roll, and he's play the guitar and play the third. Oh, the third is too sharp, and play the nishad, and it was harrowing because I couldn't hear it. And then you're dealing with this really daunting acoustic machine with 25 strings and sympathetic strings. That's
Yeah.
a whole other kettle of fish, and with the drone strings and the jala strings. So it was. I mean, the technique I was okay with. I absorbed Sarod technique, and in a few years, by I was 20, 21, I was performing on the Sarod. I was off to the races again. The guitar was
Sure.
put down. I was playing. There I was sitting, wearing a kurta, pajama, and playing with tabla players.
Mm.
And that sort of shaped my identity as I moved ahead and even moved to the US. And it was the Sarod that brought me here, not the guitar.
Mm.
you know and then I was studying John's biography, in which John McLaughlin's biography, in which he mentions that he too had that similar path, that he was playing the vina
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
many years. Like he studied the vina, and it was almost like a fork in the road where he had to make a decision to be a guitar player or a vina player, because I'm similar in that way. I'm not a instrumentalist. I got to play one instrument.
Hmm.
Whatever I need to do, it needs to be on one thing. I can't whip this out and bust that out. And I haven't even played the Sarod in more than a year now.
Wow.
You know,
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's only
teach
so much time to practice.
exactly and do things. Yeah. So that's the short history of guitar player.
Yeah.
There was a barrier, and also now it's a lot easier to study serious Western music if you're into harmony and that type of thing, and if you want to study jazz or classical music
Hmm.
in India. Late 90s, hardly any. There were some private teachers, but you really had to move to the West, and it was expensive if you wanted to go to Berkeley or Juilliard or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
So to pursue Indian music also made logical sense in the path of becoming a professional musician, because I knew I wanted to do this all my life. So this was a way to get in.
Hmm.
And invaluable training, and it was crazy, and it was difficult, and it was a lot of work, and because it's also the culture. I didn't come exactly from that sort of culture. It was very westernized, despite being my parents were both, like, they were into the traditional thing, but my dad was a global sort of citizen. He was traveling a lot. He was very educated. I come from so it was very much of an English speaking. Dad used to listen to Tchaikovsky, and
Hmm.
so then to find myself in that culture where it's like, oh, this is a guru, and you touch their feet, and you wear a kurta, and
Yeah.
these are the manners, and these are the ways, and you ask only these many questions, and You know, it was a
Yeah.
different.
Did you? I sort of. I mean, this. I'm not really totally sure how to ask this question, I guess, but as a lot of Western students, I think, have a bit of trouble sometimes adjusting to or learning sort of the cultural aspects of Indian classical music in that traditional method. But it almost sounds like you're describing the same thing as someone
Yeah.
who was born in India.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know,
Yeah.
it's assumed that if you're from India, oh, you get the culture. You know, it's actually it's like say you're growing up in New York, right? But if you're not growing up, say, around certain neighborhoods where certain diasporas live, you
Yeah.
don't really get the culture that well, the food, the ways, these. So it's or anywhere where there's a lot of, diversity. Similarly, India is extremely diverse culturally. So, and like we were saying, like I was mentioning, even the gharanas or like the schools of music have their own, cultural
Of course. Yeah.
identities and their the peculiar idiosyncrasies.
Hmm.
And so growing up as an urban kid in a big city who went to a private school and was growing up around musicians and friends, or just people around me that were primarily into Western music, listening to Led Zeppelin, or my brother was a Zepp head, and he was a huge 80s guy, so he was in the bands like Slaughter and Stryper, Motley Crue.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
going from that into like Suresh Vyas's house, where he's showing me Baba Alauddin Khan's picture and
Hmm.
explaining all the names, the various terminologies of what these Sanskrit names are for even the parts of the instrument. And I'm
Yeah.
coming from playing dive bombs.
Uh-huh.
Like I'll meet Indian musicians that come from a part of the country that's very much steeped into that tradition, say from Calcutta or like from Delhi, and they're like we're like two from two different countries.
Hmm.
I had to learn the ways.
And coming from guitar, then, when
Yeah,
you were learning Sarod, I mean, did you
yeah,
find that the construction of a Sarod and Indian classical instruments is much different than, let's say, modern guitar construction?
yeah,
Has geared tuners and all sorts of,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
what did you feel like you were entering a world of mystery or a world of frustration?
Both.
Both.
Mystery, frustration, yeah, just getting my behind kicked every day. A very strict teacher,
Mm-hmm.
really a taskmaster. And he saw something in me. He saw a spark. So he was like, okay, let's put this kid to work. Yeah, like you said, the construction of the instruments are different. These are handmade instruments by these makers that have been doing it for generations. They're real luthiers family, the father teaches the son type of thing, old world, old school
Yeah.
businesses. Even like different musical families have preferred luthiers, preferred
Yeah.
builders.
And
Like,
there's different types of Sarods depending on
yeah,
Gharanas too, right? And
yeah.
so, I mean, when you were going to start that journey, how much of it was just you fell into that's a teacher, or were you trying to research? And you had to find a left-handed Sarod. Like, there's all these little challenges that
No.
become major pathways. Like, you could have taken one teacher versus another. Now, I'm wondering, when you were doing that journey, like, how much did you know going into it?
Yeah, and there's no Sitar world or Sarod world to just
Yeah.
go grab one off the rack and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's got a little price tag on it and you plug it in. And no, I mean you're right, but that's where sort of my parents were like, my dad especially,
Yeah.
of coming from that musical family, they had like the generational information
Mm,
of what I needed to do. So I had no idea. I was like, Dad, I want to play this road. It
mm,
was on a whim, literally, like
yeah.
little, unbeknownst to me that this would like shape my life, the next 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, like, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's what I need to, who I need to call up. He spoke to his dad. He was like, go to that guy. This is what he needs to learn. This is the type of music I feel he should learn based on his personality,
Mm,
his strengths and weaknesses, so it was kind of curated.
yeah.
So it was, okay, let's go to the Heyman in Calcutta, who's been making Ustad Ali Akbar Khan's family sarods for, years.
Sure.
And let's get him one of those, the 25 string version, the one with the big belly and the little the sound bowl in the back, and not the Amjad Ali Khan version. Let's get him that. Growing up in Bombay, it was like, okay, who do we get in touch with? And then, via the musician community that my dad knew, I didn't know an Indian musician to save my life. So it was that path was, that was drawn out for me, and
Yeah.
I just had to show up.
That speaks to the importance of parents, though, right? I mean,
Yeah. It was the same with the guitar, man. It was like
Mhm.
it was like when I wanted my first guitar, I wanted to learn guitar. My dad was like, "Let me figure it out for you." He got
Yeah.
me my guitar. He got me whatever I needed. He used to get me these instructional like DVDs of like Paul Gilbert and Frank Gambale and
Oh yeah.
John Lane. That guitar nerd REH stuff.
Yeah.
Singing, learning arpeggios.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been a musician not for these guys,
Mhm.
and it was their dream.
What did they have a sort of any sense of pride when you wanted to learn the Sarod and move away from guitar? And conversely, if so, did they have a disappointment when you went back to guitar?
No, man, it was not. It was music. I could have been playing the tuba.
Okay.
Yeah, for them, the kid is doing music. It's sort of it takes the family tradition forward.
Mhm.
They're obsessed with music. Absolutely, like I said, music wasn't a hobby at home. It was serious stuff. When there were like music programs on television or whatever, and if my brother and I were just goofing around,
Yeah.
talking whatever as kids, we'd get shouted upon. Like, shut up! We're trying to watch. You're gonna make me miss a note. So it was the music thing was whether it's a Western instrument or an instrument from Mars, they didn't really care, or an instrument from Bengal, it was all the same. The sarod, particularly, my dad was fond of because he loved Indian music. He
Hmm.
was absolutely in love with Indian music, and he got to watch Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and some of my teachers perform, and he was close to that world because his father was from that world, my grandfather, my great grandfather. So when the sarod happened, he kind of became even more serious about it. He
Hmm.
felt like there was much more of a burden to it as it comes with the music. As you play sitar, it's like everything is serious business, especially if you're an Indian kid. I think it's like there's so much competition and there's so much of trying to get things right and do it right and play in tune and play in rhythm and
Yeah.
practice well, and like the teacher puts the pressure. It's like, okay, now you got to get to work. Now you've graduated to, it's not fun in games. If you thought it was fun in games playing Dream
Yeah.
Theater Leagues, this is going to kick your ass even more.
Hmm.
So it was more of like a serious. I mean, man, I remember like my father passed away a few years ago, but even like my festival tours, and I'd already established myself. He used to call me and go like send me a recording. It's like, I've already like, sort of, I've sort of made him proud, and but even then, and he was like I don't care if Ustad Zakir Hussain is sitting in the audience, which I would love for him to be. But if my dad was sitting there, I would be nervous because he would listen to, like, deeply, intently to everything. So there was more of that sort of like a Hawkeye type of thing with.
Yeah. Not to get personal, but I guess I'll ask anyways. Did his passing sort of free you in a way, or change your trajectory in any sort of way?
It's actually it's yes, it's personal, but it's actually I'm quite comfortable talking about it. Yes, it did. There was definitely a timing thing with it that I wholesale went into playing classical Indian music on the guitar after he passed, but not because I wanted to hide it from him. In fact, he gave it its blessings before he passed away.
Mhm.
He didn't get to see me perform on it for
Mhm.
most of his life. He saw me perform the Sarod. He's hundreds of concerts. And if he loved it, he took you out for dinner and you got what. If he hated it, the car ride back was, oh man, the dressing down on the ride back and the silence in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was definitely, he was intense, very intense. Well, he gave it its blessings because for him, he loved innovation,
Mm.
because I was composing music as a composer from the age of 17 or 18, putting out records when I was 21, which were very non-Indian. Or if they had Indian, but it was like quote unquote fusion, but really this crossover thing that he was really into. So he was encouraging me to not just be a one-trick pony, if you will. He wanted me to study counterpoint. He wanted me to study harmony seriously because he was into that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted me to know my TIs in 9.5 beats or whatever. So it was a demanding ask. He loved it, man. When I played him clips of when I was developing it, fretless thing, I was constantly checking with his ears for it.
Yeah.
I needed that from him. And he was like, man, yeah, this is, I mean, you've put in so much work in the Sarod, it's translating,
Yeah.
Because interestingly, I used to take lessons from Hariprasad Chaurasia, the great Bansuri player. And I used to show up at his place with my guitar.
Interesting.
And he teach me raga music. He used to play the Bansuri and teach me raga music when I used to be with the guitar, not the Sarod. Because he the Bansuri is like in the, because Indian music has fixed keys. So he was like D sharp, E, which is Sarod, it's impossible. It's mostly in the key of C, or B in this case.
Yeah.
And I used to take walks with Hariprasad Chaurasia in the morning. And back then he had told me when I was developing this other guitar. So this idea of doing a fretless guitar thing was with me since I was like 2021.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was germinating. So I built this really sort of cheap instrument done by this local guy. It was a complete failure. The instrument didn't work. It was just an experiment. I had no guidance. I had no experience.
Yeah.
But but I used to take it to Harji, and I used to walk around in the morning, and he told me something that I told my dad, and it resonated with him. To answer that question was that Hariprasad Chaurasia's advice to me is like, look, when you're gonna try to do something new, people are gonna not like it or reject it. You got to keep doing it, because then they're gonna start to love it, and then they'll only want you to do that. But these 3 stages are gonna happen. It even happened when Alauddin Khan turned the Sarod into this. This isn't the original Sarod. This is a modified Sarod. This is a modern.
It's amazing that people think of that as not the modern Sarod, but you're right. Yeah, it is.
So the sitar as well. And I mean, how much flack did he get for that?
Yeah.
Dad was in it, and then I took to Hariprasad's advice that you got to keep doing it. Got to keep getting it. You got to keep refining it and present it with honesty, just like you did with your Sarod. And people will get around to it because it's the chip off the old block. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel.
All right, I'm just going to break in real quickly and give a huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. Without their support, videos like this would not be able to be made. So a giant, huge thank you. I'm going to use a fun, silly voices to say your names for this video. All right, so I'm going to do clown voices. Okay. We have Mina K, Ron E, and Ruth S. All right. Okay, well, I think I've lost my mind. So if you like this video and you like the content I'm making, please come on over to Patreon. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I have some giveaways coming up, and I have some giveaways that there's still time to join, including the opportunity to receive a copy of Moon Unit Zappa's memoir, Earth to Moon, which is a great book if you like everything Frank Zappa, or you just really like memoirs. It's really incredible. Highly recommend that. All right, so enough about me and Patreon and plugging all that. Let's get back to the interview you came here for. Thank you so much. No, actually, I didn't realize that you played left-handed Sarod. It just didn't even occur to me until you took it out. And I'm looking at it.
It's amazing because that was one real advantage, Jeff. Because most of my Sarod learning, luckily for me, happened in Maihar. Small town of India, where Alauddin Khan, the great Sarod maestro, teacher of Pandit Ravi Shankar and Nikhil Banerjee and Ustad Ali Ibrahim's father. That's why the Maihar Gharana. So when I say Maihar Gharana, it's really because that's that room. I used to sit where Ravi Shankar ji used to practice, and for years, my Sarod teacher Ashish Khan used to take me to Maihar, and his grandfather was left-handed.
Oh wow!
So the Alauddin Khan was left-handed. So I used to practice on his Sarod.
That's wild.
Wild. It's like Beethoven's piano or something. And yeah, she used to be like, man, okay, my grandfather's instrument has not been touched for a year. Your job is to wake up in the morning, go change the strings, clean it up, service it, oil it up, and then you get to practice on it. I was like, yeah.
That's really wild.
Yeah,
That's
so
really wild.
Yeah, man. And I used to take extra time with putting the strings on so I could like, I mean, this is the instrument that he taught, like Ravi Shankar Darbari Kannada. Like it's crazy, and so him being left-handed, even his Senia Rabab, his Sursingar, which played a deep segueing into this, the sound of the Sursingar and the Surbahar, has a deep impact because I studied those styles.
Sure. Okay.
So that played a big role into into this guy right here.
So maybe that's a good segue to talk about your wild and amazing double-necked instrument.
Before this, it was a Kiesel. Kiesel guitars. Maybe I have a few of those. That was the first one, but this one right here, as you can see,
Yeah. Now, now are those double 8 strings? What's the setup there?
7/7.
7/7. Okay. And explain to people why you chose 7.
So for the longest time, I studied with a piano player, the
Mhm.
great Santiago Peepson, jazz and classical pianist. He was like really my guru when it came to studying Western music and just opened my mind into that whole world and like a lot of harmonic analyses. And
Mm.
so one thing that through that I discovered is that I love the piano for a reason because, up is up, down is down. It's a very linear instrument in that sense.
Mhm.
And everything can be sort of telegraphed throughout. If you take a C major triad and you play it anywhere on the piano, you don't have to change the fingerings, where on the guitars, because the tuning and just having the G and the B string, the dreaded, from fourths going to a third,
Yeah.
every guitar player's nightmare. So, and just having the lower C on the piano made me want to have an extra B string so that my first fret is a C.
Got it. Okay.
So that gives me an equal division of octaves. And it gives me 4 octaves through and through. And of course, I mean, just sonically, I wanted a lower bass string. I didn't want to go all the way down to 8, because that's the bass player's territory.
Yeah.
But at least with the 7, I felt like when I was just stopping at the first fret of the F and the E, it felt like I wanted to go lower.
Yeah. Now, when you started experimenting with the fretless side, also obviously you're not worried about chords because it's pretty impossible to get if I play a bar chord, for example.
Yeah.
So, but do you keep the same sort of string intervals, or does everything go to fourths, or do you keep that third?
Same tuning. I didn't want
Okay.
to change the muscle memory of, relearning
Yeah.
my fingerings. I wanted to keep everything guitar as
Yeah.
I grew up playing since I was 6, 7 years old. I experimented with fourths, like Alan Holdsworth tunings,
Sure.
all fourths, or with Indian tunings where you go the Sapa Sama. So you
Yeah.
go the 1/4, 1/5, 1/4, which some of my students do on guitar.
Mhm.
And I found that it's a double neck, so I even have a fretted neck. So I don't want to have a separate set of fingerings for this
Sure.
neck and
Yeah.
this neck, and it's too much work, and I'm gonna mess it up. So
Yeah.
for me, it was just like your muscle memory is there in terms of, especially when you're playing vertically,
Mhm.
and the horizontal thing is sort of like the muscle memory is coming from the Sarod.
Yeah.
So I did not change the tunings.
We talked a little bit about sustain on the Sarod, but sustain on the fretless guitar, how are you maintaining that? You're not using a Sustainiac or an EBow or anything like that. What are you doing to make sure that your notes don't sort of like plink
Yeah.
out, especially
I,
on the
yeah.
higr strings?
Yeah. I get asked this quite a bit because a lot of guitar players think I'm using an EBow, like a Sustainiac, or
Yeah.
it's part technique. Like, you work on that, Although I gotta say this, that fretless instruments in general will have more sustain because the friction from the frets is not stopping the notes. So that does help. In general, a fretless sound will have more sustain. The technique of just playing an instrument that you're fighting a lot, the Sarod, it's always an uphill battle to
Mhm.
try to get the right amount of sustain from it. And especially if you're playing that Drupad, Senia Binkar, Baba Laudin type of long, mean, alap kind of things, you really have to work on it. And that's like the intention, the pressure, the amount of relaxation your hands have, the angle of your calluses to the note, all of that matter. Somebody was like, "Oh, because you're using this fractal stuff," which does help. I use a lot of fractal products
Mhm.
exclusively. I'm using the Axif X3, the FM9, FM3 when I'm flying for flight dates and
Sure.
tours and stuff. So I work a lot with. So one of the reasons behind trying to get the sustain also is I'm from Bombay, right? So I really, for me, like the national instrument, state instrument of Bombay is not the sitar sarod, it's the sarangi.
Mm,
That's my favorite Indian instrument in the world. I find that to be cousins with the electric guitar.
okay.
You know, when I heard Joe Satriani's Flying in a Blue Dream for the first time when I was 8, 9 years old, my dad actually commented that sounds like a sarangi.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
stuck. Yeah, the way he's playing has such a Sultan Khan kind of
Hmm.
thing to it. I've always had that sound in my ear. And sarangi has incredible sustain because of the bow and just because of the
Sure.
construction. And it's just like it's a cathedral, like a
Hmm.
friend of mine calls it. So the with the fractal stuff, I'm always trying to dial that in between sort of the sound of an electric violin, or like El Shankar.
Okay. Yep.
A little
Yep.
bit of that, yeah. But sarangi, of course, my training as a senior Beankar musician with the elements of Rudravina,
Mhm.
Sursingar, Surbahar, Sarod, Sitar, all of that. Because we were taught all those styles because Alauddin Khan imbibed all those styles, especially in the Drupad thing. So that's why the bass sort of has a very much of a Veena, Beankar kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And working with this fractal, the digital modeling, I'll have like literally a video of Sultan Khan and I'll stop and I'll go to a filter,
Mhm.
try to dial in the sound, I'll try to dial in the sustain, I'll stop, I'll go to the EQ, and
Mhm.
I'm really trying to get my sound as close to that as possible.
I want to ask some sort of techie nerd questions about guitar here.
Sure.
Uh, on your fretless, what sort of radius are you using? Is it relatively
Uh,
flat?
yeah, it's 25 and a half. It's a flat radius.
Yeah.
I don't exactly, I have the specs somewhere, but it's super flat. It's also the same. It's almost like if you can think of like an Ibanez gem.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that type of radius because I also like on the fretted neck play a lot of legato.
Okay.
A lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
my that sort of fluid saxophone, John Coltrane kind of thing, Alan Holdsworth
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Gambale and John Lane, those are my players. I mean, I'll do the alternate picking stuff. So I like a flat radius with a lower action.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the same for the fretless. Although I have to, because I'm using 9 to 52s. For the fretless side, I'm starting to think I need heavier strings.
For the fretless side.
For the fretless side, it feels too thin. I always talk about fretless, playing fretless as ice skating.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like you got to find the right balance, and your skates have to have the type of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of if you're if the blades are too thin or too thick. So the gauge of strings, especially for the fretless side, because I've always been a 9s to 52s kind of guy.
Yeah.
So for the fretless, I think like I have these 13s. I'm gonna try.
Yeah. Yeah.
Road strings are thick, so maybe that's what that's sort of like what my subconscious is telling me to do.
Is that an ebony fingerboard or
This
is
is
it a
a yeah,
composite?
yeah, this is an instrument, but like I really should talk about this instrument. It's,
Yeah.
it's made by
Let's hear. I want to know
yeah,
it all. I
yeah,
want to
this
know it
is
all.
yeah, of course. So I mean, look at the guitars you have, man. Well, this is made by Ave Guitars. He's based out of a small town close to Istanbul, Turkey, called Eskişehir. So he's a Turkish guitar
Oh,
builder
okay.
that whose work we were following each other for a while. Before this, like I mentioned, I was playing the Kiesel
Yeah.
uh, double necks, which I still have, and a lot of the recordings I did was from those. And then last year, this guy and I started talking, Ave, and because I was seeing some of his designs, and I was fascinated, and I also realized that in Turkey especially, they have a deep and an old and a developed tradition of fretless music as
Sure.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So they kind of get how to make fretless guitars, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and so we started talking, and then he wanted to build me this instrument with this amazing poplar burl top. It's got a Corina back, which I love because
Oh,
Eddie
I
Van
love.
Halen's first,
Yeah.
yeah, the one he recorded Eruption was Corina.
Yeah.
So I did that.
Green is the way to go.
And yeah, it's the balance of the right type of brightness and just like the
Hmm.
gravitas of the sound, and it's just got this attack that I love. And Poplar Burl has this, a little bit of this compression and this a slower attack, which I like. It's not immediately in your face, so I like that. Yeah, Gaboon Ebony, and this is, this was told to me as a wood known as Akaju.
Okay.
Yeah, I try to look it up. It's a type of African mahogany.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he sourced all these amazing woods, and if I had to get this guitar built here, back home in the States, I don't even know. I would have to sell a kidney or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one guy, he handmade it, no assembly line, just like the
Incredible.
Sarod.
Mm-hmm.
Every fit to finish, one guy,
Mm.
He used to send me videos of him doing the inlays, and he did each and every inlay by hand.
That's incredible.
All these mother of pearl inlays, the tree of life and the moon thing over here.
Mm-hmm.
It was everything, and we were just like, it was like working with an old school luthier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always gravitate back to, one guy in a tool shed just soldering away, yeah, and you can feel it in the, it's just got this human, it's very alive.
We had spoken via Instagram before this interview, but one of the things I thought was interesting is that you are not incorporating a Chikari into your fretless playing, so that's a new approach. I guess for people that don't know, really quickly, what is Chikari, and then why no Chikari?
Okay, what is Chikari? Chikari is, you're sitar player, and are these drone strings or continuity strings
Mm-hmm.
that you use for two purposes. When you're playing the slow melody, it helps you keep the continuity of sound, so that when the note decays, something is there to fill it up. It also establishes the tonic, or Indian music is modal, and it's fixed in one key. So in this case, the Chikari is tuned to the sa, or the tonic of whatever chosen key you're in, depending on your instrument range. And the third function is it helps keep rhythm when you're playing with the rhythm instruments, tabla, pakawaj, whatever. So it helps you keep time. It helps you keep the pulse. Chikari is a whole language of it, by itself. It was one of those things that, because I studied Chikari, especially, I was sort of gotten well known for my Jhala expositions in my Sarod concerts, because in the Mahir style, Chikari itself is a subject.
Mm.
The different types of Chikari angs, or Chikari expositions, or Chikari styles that you employ in the Jhala section, and they're all sort of, Bahadur Khan Sahib had one. My teacher Ashish Khan Sahib had his own Chikari language. So it is a developed concept. The reason why not to have it now is because I was pursuing more of a high gain sarangi type of saturated sound, as opposed to more of a cleaner acoustic sound. The Chikari would be way too much frequency for me to handle.
Yeah.
It would just be uncontrollable.
Mm-hmm.
So my solution to that is, and that's, sometimes you have to do that in order to, for the larger picture, you have to let one thing go.
And also, though, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Sarengis don't have a Chikari used as a rhythmic tool at all. I mean, it has sympathetic strings, but it doesn't have that Chikari like you'd have on Sarod or on a sitar. So it's not required in Indian music either.
I mean, vocal music doesn't have a Chikari in that.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So, because it all follows the voice in the end of the day.
Yeah.
So to me, Indian music, as I guess John Mclaughlin would agree, because every Shakti album is in the key of E, bar none, that E is probably the best key for guitar players to me, and I feel like to explore this music, because it gives you a lot of range.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you 4 octaves, and it gives you this open E string, which you can use as a Chikari, especially during the faster sections of the music. With the tabla player, you can lock in and create the Chikari effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even in the alap, you can use it as a continuity. And so I felt that if to split the difference like that means I don't have to deal with the headache of a Chikari.
Yeah,
I got a lot of respect, because Chikari strings break and they go out of tune. And
I want to talk about Iron Axis. This
Sure.
is your
Great.
current project. A trio, correct? Is that correct?
It's a duo. Yeah.
A duo, okay.
The album's called 2286. It was made in 22, and the bass player was born in 86. So it's simple. It's not some Back to the Future, some cryptic Fibonacci sequence thing. I mean, like I said, I've always been a metalhead. I just love that music. That's the music that I grew up with. That's the music that's closest to me. Indian music was an acquired taste that happened later. I was gonna do a solo guitar record, as an solo guitar record, in not like a Hindustani record or a jazz fusion record, like more of like a Mike Varney, Paul Gilbert, for
Sure.
the guitarists out there, one of those shrapnel type, high octane shred record. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started to write a lot of the music for that. And I just love the sound of those 90s, guitar centric records that used to come out. You don't see, you do, but then not like the way they used to do it.
Yeah.
It was over the top, it was almost like a circus. I started to write the music, and as my nature is, the music started to get serious and time signatures and harmony and dance and progressive, and the Indian element came in. It was meant to be a solo record. And then I started to work with Phil on it, and then we turned it because his ideas and his input, and then he played bass on it and he engineered. I'm like, man, this guy, we've worked together before on so many things, and we have the same musical influences when it comes to metal and rock and roll in general, or jazz even. So it was just, we've known each other for 10 years. We've worked on a lot of projects. We've produced for other artists, studio work. It just made sense that we kind of joined forces on this. And he came up with the name Iron Axes. I don't know why, but it's a cool name. We're like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's a good metal name. Yeah. Yeah.
So I had all the music ready, and then we went and recorded it. We put it out this year. It got great press. It was in Guitar World magazine last year, and it has a metal thing, but it also has a lot of depth. It has like this Mahavishnu, like talking about influences. I'm a big Mahavishnu orchestra guy.
Sure.
I played a tribute band with the Mahavishnu orchestra thing, and one of the original members of the orchestra is in the band. So it has a lot of that. Of course, it has a lot of my jazz influences, the metal thing, a lot of the Dream Theater thing, a lot of Satriani and Vi and Holdsworth, and a lot of guitar nerdery in it.
Yeah.
A lot of Hindustani rhythms and Carnatic rhythms get thrown in.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So it's progressive, and it's modern metal. Metal's a field now. It's not just a genre anymore. Just like
no, there's a lot of different tiny areas of metal now. It's really wild.
There's a lot of Indian influence in it, as I've come to learn. The drummers that go to Berkeley, or all these cats, that they're all listening to Salva Ganesh, or Zakir Hussain, or
amazing. Yeah. I'm going to transition to a new segment that I'm trying to do in these interviews, and you're going to be sort of the first guinea pig to do this.
Do it.
But so I have this part. I'm calling this Jeff Starr's 5-star questionnaire, and these are 5 short either/or questions to help viewers get to know you in a sort of fun, maybe slightly silly way. So,
awesome.
Question number 1.
Is that like a Yelp 5-star review? If I suck, I got a 5-star review.
So okay. So here's question number 1.
Yeah.
All right. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Number 2. Meat or vegetables?
Meat.
Soup or sandwich?
Sandwich.
Drink or drive?
Neither. But if I had a choice, drink and not drive.
All right. Excellent. Late night or early morning?
Nowadays, I've been an early morning guy.
Okay.
But that changes. I mean, it's transient.
Now I think everyone knows all your deep secrets now.
It's out.
So I know you said you're gigging a lot with Iron Axis.
Yeah.
So can you tell everyone what's the best way to follow you, follow the band, find your albums, et cetera, et cetera? This is your chance to give all your plugs.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, before Iron Axis, let me plug one thing. I have a solo album coming out next year with AGS Recordings, Alternative Guitar Summit. It is my friend Joel Harrison, who's a great guitar player, composer, and it's a fantastic label. This year, he put out this compilation record, which had myself, the great Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mike Stern was in it, Camila Reza, some big names in jazz, and we had a great festival here in New York at LPR, Le Poisson Rouge, where I got to perform with all these guys. And next year, I'm coming out with a solo record called Liquid Reality, which has some absolute killer monster stuff. We were talking about Shakti, so the 3rd generation of Shakti, the great Swami Salva Ganesh is on it. and Satoshi Takahashi, the great Japanese drummer. Utsav Lal, fantastic pianist that plays Indian music. That's my jazz fusion, Carnatic, Hindustani sort of thing that they're putting on. It's a very guitar-centric record coming out with a guitar label, AGS Records, next year, and we're doing a lot of press for that.
Right.
And we'll Iron Axis, the best place to find me is on social media. So you can find me on Instagram.
Yep.
That's where I post the most. And you can find me on YouTube, of course. There's all my music over there. And on all the streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, all the evil streaming platforms that we have to grapple with. The music is there, and you can just come and I put up my tour dates all the time on social media because I feel that's the easiest way to connect with people.
Yeah.
So on Instagram, I usually my tour dates are there. I'll be touring India this time with this crazy guy, playing traditional music in very traditional settings in India with this instrument. So I'm excited and I'm terrified.
Well, that's super exciting. Super exciting. And just to anyone watching, I will put links to all those things, all those various places in the video description, so you can obviously easily get to where you need to go next. Okay. Anything else you want to mention, talk about, or have we covered it all?
I think we pretty much covered it all. I want to ask you how's life been with the sitar as a guitar sitar player.
That's tough. That's a tough question. That's one of those things. It's another hour of talking,
Wow.
but I will sum it up and say that I feel these days like there's a lot of study of Indian classical music happening up here and less happening in my hands. And that is been both really a great education, but also sort of sad too, because I know you miss a day of practice, and sometimes it's like going back a month. So
yeah.
So that's something I'm still trying to figure out for my own personal journey, but that does not mean that I have any less love for the sitar or my wonderful guru, Ustad Ikhlaq Hussain, and this whole process of growing and learning.
Right. Maybe get a guitar sitar going.
Yes, well,
that was my solution, man. I couldn't do two instruments.
I know. I have this Godan. This is actually
beautiful.
This is their fretless Listentar, which is sort of a set up sort of like an oud in the way it's strung.
The double strings,
double strings, except for the single E string.
Is it the one with the MIDI thing on it?
It has just a regular. I wish it had actually better electronics. It's just a standard quarter inch out.
Right.
But yeah, that's in my journey of wanting to go. Oh, I want to take all this stuff about Indian classical music that I'm learning and absorbing, that I'm struggling to play on a sitar. Boy, I just want to pick up my guitar and do it. And then I was like, you need to be able to mean properly, and the intonation is not right, and all these sort of struggles. And then that's when I found you. And then that's why I started watching all of your stuff, and we started talking, and now here we are. So,
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, no, I think what you're doing is very exciting, and it's very inspirational. And I really like seeing that there's so much happening in Indian classical music, but beyond that too, in the worlds of fusion with it and traditional. And I have some, friends and other people I've talked to are very old school traditional, and then you're doing sort of modern stuff, but obviously you've done your homework too and dedicated there. So it's not like you're just faking it through, which is what I think really important.
Very important.
A lot of people, I think, pick up a guitar and they play some harmonic minor scales and they think they're doing it, and it's like it's not, So
I mean, look at John. I mean, he's the best example. John McLaughlin, like he put himself through the ringer. It's like you want to you write poetry, learn the language.
Exactly.
You write a book, just want to write literature, learn the language. So like for me, like I said, as you were mentioning, urban kid, and like we were saying earlier, assume that if you're born in India, Indian music will just come to you.
Yeah.
It's not the case. Even for me, the culture was the barrier. The notes and the rhythms and all that came naturally. It was like, wow, this is the way these things are done. And the microtonality, which I take so seriously, which I pass on now to my students.
Yeah.
Every individual raga has to have its individual set of notes and approaches and ragang and phraseology and mood and all that. So that was the biggest lesson I've learned from it.
Yeah.
Being a modal system and being a rhythmic and a melodic system, how much can you juice out? And it's such a
Mm.
genius system, and it's so deep and it's so pure because of the fact that it is just intonation and the notes are so, it's we call it Nada Brahma,
Hmm.
that which connects with the universe. So, it's deep stuff, and I love it. It was an acquired taste for me, like I said,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
coming from rock and roll. But then, man, like just like it's evening time, and like I'll start playing Rag Marva, and like 5 hours gone. I just got back from this European tour where I was just exclusively playing Hindustani concerts after a while
Mm.
because I was touring with Iron Axes before that, and the music is so choreographed and with the click tracks, and they're like a million time signatures, and I'm playing all these crazy chord changes and shredding through the. And then just to sit and play with a tabla player in this deep, focused, listening
Mm.
environment, tanpura in the back and alap, I'm like, I am so free, you
Yeah.
know? And of course, the music always keeps you in your tiptoes. Are you in tune? Is the mood right? Once you kind of transcend that, it is such a liberating form of music. Just put the notes away, put the pages away, just
Hmm.
sit and play it, and then
Yeah.
you start to like experience this type of freedom. And that's what I gravitate towards for it because I love structure and I love to be in this constant like organized in a very Western sense. Like, okay, let's play the song, let's
Hmm.
play the parts, let's play the piece, let's have all the sections, the melody here and the drum fill here and then the bass thing here and whatever the transitions. But to play that alap in Vrindavani Sarang or whatever,
Hmm.
it's just a freeing. It
Yeah.
kind of cleanses. It just takes. It's just like this is like I'm just by myself. Then the special interactions with the tabla player would only happen in that moment, and they're never repeated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Special ephemeral quality to it.
Yeah.
It's.
It's great, man. I love what you're doing. So
Thank you
keep
so
doing it,
much.
please.
Yeah,
Everyone, please check out all of your music. All right. I think we're officially done.
yeah.
I'm going to do a little wave and say bye.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's
Thank you,
been
man.
such a
Thank you.